There comes a moment in the life of a spiritually awakened person when the world starts to feel different, in a way that's almost impossible to explain. Nothing outside has changed. The streets look the same, the people look the same, the conversations sound familiar. But something inside you has quietly shifted. You start noticing patterns you used to miss. You see emotional dynamics that other people walk through completely blind. You sense intentions hiding beneath polite smiles and casual words. And slowly, a strange realization settles in. The world is not as conscious as you once believed. Carl Jung spent decades studying people who went through deep psychological awakening. These were individuals who had faced their shadow, confronted the parts of themselves they once rejected, and slowly integrated them. Through that process, they developed an unusual clarity about human behavior. But what Jung discovered while watching these people disturbed him. The greatest danger to an awakened person is rarely ignorance or obvious evil. The real threat is something far more subtle and far more powerful: the unconscious reactions of the people around them. When you become more conscious, your awareness starts exposing the unconscious patterns running in others. Most people move through life without ever examining their inner world. So when someone appears who can see through emotional defenses, social masks, and hidden motives, the unconscious mind reacts automatically. Resistance appears, projection begins, envy quietly grows, and suddenly the awakened person becomes the target of hostility they never saw coming. That's why Jung reached a powerful conclusion. There are certain truths that awakened individuals must learn to protect, not because secrecy is manipulative, but because psychological survival sometimes requires silence. Today I want to share 5 secrets Jung believed spiritually awakened people must learn to keep. These are not games. They're not about pretending to be mysterious. They are practical strategies for moving through a world that is still largely unconscious. Secret 1. Never reveal your absolute certainty. One of the first things that changes during awakening is how deeply you trust your own perception. Before this process, most of us spend years doubting ourselves. We question our intuition. We second-guess what we notice in other people. We look outside for validation before we trust what we already feel. But as you integrate the unconscious, something remarkable happens. Your perception sharpens. You start noticing emotional contradictions in conversations. You detect subtle inconsistencies in people's actions. You recognize motives they try to hide behind politeness. Jung called this differentiated perception. The unconscious is constantly processing far more information than the conscious mind can put into words. When you begin integrating your shadow, that information becomes clearer and easier to trust. Here's the danger. When you openly express certainty about what you see, it often threatens the psychological stability of those around you. Certainty exposes insecurity. People who haven't faced their own shadow depend on a fragile story about who they are and how the world works. When someone sees through their illusions and speaks about it with calm confidence, discomfort rises almost instantly, and that discomfort quickly turns into projection. Suddenly, you're accused of arrogance. You think you know everything. You're judging people. You think you're better than everyone else. But you're not claiming superiority. You're simply trusting what you perceive. The unconscious mind, however, experiences that trust as a threat. Jung watched many highly aware people who spoke openly about their perceptions experience sudden social hostility. Relationships collapsed. Workplaces became tense. Groups turned defensive, not because they were wrong, but because they broke an unspoken social agreement. We pretend not to see what we see. Society runs on comfortable illusions. When someone starts naming the hidden dynamics, those illusions crack, and resistance follows. So Jung's advice was simple and powerful. See everything. Trust your perception. But do not announce your clarity to people who are not ready to hear it. Your certainty is a form of power, and power becomes vulnerable the moment it is displayed to those who feel threatened by it. Secret 2. Never reveal your map of transformation. Many people think spiritual awakening is a random emotional experience that appears and disappears. For some it is, but for many others, it becomes something far more intentional. Once you begin the journey of individuation, you slowly develop an internal map of transformation. You identify the childhood wounds that shaped you. You examine unconscious habits. You explore the parts of yourself that were once rejected or ignored. Step by step, you start rebuilding your psychological structure. This process is rarely chaotic. In many cases, it becomes deeply strategic. You know exactly what you're working on. You know which beliefs you're changing, which patterns you're breaking, and which emotional loops you're finally releasing. But revealing that internal map can be surprisingly dangerous, because transformation threatens systems that depend on your old stability. Think about family dynamics. Most families unconsciously assign emotional roles. One person becomes the rescuer. Another becomes the victim. Someone else becomes the scapegoat who absorbs the tension for everyone. These roles are rarely spoken about, yet they keep a fragile emotional balance. When one person starts changing, the entire structure becomes unstable. The person who used to accept blame stops accepting it. The person who tolerated manipulation begins setting boundaries, and the system reacts. If you tell people exactly what you're working on, they now know where your growth is happening and where you're still vulnerable. That knowledge can be used, consciously or unconsciously, to pull you back. Jung saw this again and again. People who shared their healing journey hoping for support often received criticism, ridicule, or subtle pressure designed to return them to their old role. That's why he emphasized silent transformation. Do the work quietly. Study your patterns in private. Let the results of your growth become visible over time. Transformation does not need an audience. Sometimes the safest growth happens away from constant observation. Secret 3. Never reveal your boundary for betrayal. One of the deepest changes that happens during shadow integration is the transformation of empathy. Before awakening, many sensitive people struggle with boundaries. They forgive too easily. They excuse harmful behavior. They tolerate disrespect, hoping the other person will eventually change. But when you confront your shadow honestly, something shifts. You start recognizing manipulation more clearly. You understand the difference between real compassion and self-sacrifice. Jung described this as selective empathy. You still care deeply, but you no longer allow your care to be used against you. Clear internal boundaries form. You know exactly what behavior you will no longer accept. You know what you will do if betrayal happens again. But announcing those boundaries in advance can weaken them. When manipulative people know your limits, they often begin testing them carefully. They create situations designed to make you look unreasonable. They generate confusion. They recruit others to question your decisions. When the boundary stays internal, something very different occurs. The other person expects the old pattern of tolerance and endless forgiveness. Instead, they meet immediate consequences, without warning, without argument, without drama. You simply remove yourself. The dynamic ends quietly and decisively. This is powerful psychological protection. Compassion remains, but it is no longer defenseless. Secret 4. Never reveal your sacred wound. Every person who goes through deep psychological awakening carries a wound from the past. Childhood abandonment, betrayal, years of feeling unseen or misunderstood. Jung noticed that unresolved trauma often creates what he called the compulsion to repeat, the unconscious drive to recreate the same painful dynamics again and again, hoping this time the outcome will be different. But when shadow integration happens, something extraordinary takes place. The wound begins to transform. The experience that once caused suffering becomes a source of wisdom. You recognize the pattern that controlled you. You understand the hidden lesson inside the pain. Gradually, the wound becomes medicine. What once felt like weakness becomes strength and clarity, yet revealing that fully transformed wound to everyone can create unexpected problems. Many people still live inside their victim narratives. When they meet someone who has truly healed, it challenges the identity they've built around their suffering. Unconsciously, they may try to pull you back into the role of the wounded one. They treat you as fragile. They keep referencing your past trauma. They encourage you to revisit pain you've already integrated and moved beyond. Often, this isn't intentional cruelty. It comes from discomfort. Your healing quietly shows them that healing is possible for them too. And that realization can be deeply unsettling. So the awakened person learns to treat the wound as something sacred. It is not a story for public display. It is a source of wisdom that should only be shared with those who are truly ready to receive it. Secret 5. Never reveal your uncanny awareness. The final secret is the most subtle. When you develop deep psychological awareness, you become highly skilled at reading social dynamics. You can sense emotional tension in a room. You notice unspoken signals. You recognize the unconscious roles people play in relationships. Jung called the social mask we present to the world the persona. Most people become trapped inside their persona and believe it is who they really are. The awakened person understands something different. The persona is simply a tool that allows us to move smoothly through society. Once you become conscious of the mask, you gain the ability to adjust your behavior intentionally. You become socially flexible and emotionally perceptive. But revealing this level of awareness can make others uncomfortable. If people realize you understand social dynamics at a deep level, they may feel exposed. They start wondering what you see in them. They worry they're being silently analyzed or judged. Jung's advice was simple yet profound. Remain human. Allow small imperfections to show. Do not present yourself as flawless or overly perceptive. This is not deception. It is humility. It protects others from feeling threatened by your awareness and keeps interactions natural and comfortable. At first glance, these 5 secrets might sound like instructions for hiding who you are. But Jung's deeper message was never about secrecy for its own sake. It was about protecting consciousness. Awareness changes how you move through the world. The world itself, however, remains largely unconscious. The awakened person must learn to hold 2 realities at the same time: inner clarity and outer diplomacy. True psychological sovereignty does not come from revealing everything you know. It comes from understanding when silence is the wiser choice. The most powerful observer is often the one who sees everything, while revealing very little. In that quiet awareness, a deeper strength begins to form. Not the strength of control, but the strength of understanding. Because consciousness is not only a gift, as Jung often suggested, it is also a responsibility. When you awaken, you become responsible for protecting your awareness while navigating a world that is still learning how to see. Sometimes the wisest path forward is taken quietly, with patience, with perception, and with the calm confidence of someone who understands far more than they feel the need to reveal. If even one of these secrets resonated with you, take a quiet moment to reflect on your own journey. Awareness often grows in silence, and sometimes the most powerful transformations are the ones no one else ever sees. If this video helped you see your path a little more clearly, consider supporting the channel. Like this video. It helps the message reach more people who are ready to wake up to their own inner world. And if you want to explore more insights inspired by Carl Jung and the deeper layers of the human mind, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.